Your daughter to the airport. And unlike the United States, where you have an airport about as many as we have churches on every corner, they don't have that in South Africa. So she is on the road. So we have the good pleasure, the good fortune of welcoming Geraldine, AKA Gigi, who's in the house. And she has done this with us once before. She filled in for Nadja. She's very versed in the book, very passionate about this process known as Alcoholics Anonymous. And we welcome her aboard. I remember we went through previously on a Design for Living, like as if this was a weekend game show host or a soap opera. We left you hanging last time. We went through the instructions for step 3, the third step prayer together. Determined that may have been what they were talking about when it says we stood at the turning point, because it tells us that whether we uttered this prayer or one that we made up on our own, the wording was optional, the book said, we thought well before taking this step. I think what I'm doing is inventorying my life before I take inventory. How has my life been going thus far to bring me to the point of Alcoholics Anonymous to say, guess what? I'm destroying myself at my own hands and I can't stop it. I come to believe that there's a solution here. And step 3 is about making a decision to participate with the solution. And more importantly than whether or not there's a God behind door number 3, is that I'm convinced that my way of life is not working. And then they spend 2.5 pages on the instructions for step 3, where you would think they would tell us how to find or where to find God, what he looks like, what his name is, what he's wearing. It doesn't tell us any of that at all. What it does is describes a life run on self, an unsurrendered life, all alone, apart from our maker. And we get to the point where we realize that we've done this. So we say this prayer, God, I offer myself to thee. And it says sometimes an effect, sometimes a great one was felt at once. And what we talked about last week is whether or not a great effect was felt or not. If we follow the instructions, it doesn't matter. When we put the cake pans into the oven, we don't check it every 30 seconds to see if it's risen yet, because I'm sure that we'll drop it. What we do is we trust it in 37.5 minutes it's going to come out looking the way it does on the box. Sometimes we get a great feeling. Maybe the cake rises immediately. Hallelujah. It's got some angel food cake. It has wings. But if not, if it goes in looking like a pancake, it's supposed to. And then it says, this was only a beginning. Only a beginning. Remember, we talked about Jim made a beginning. It says at the end of step 4, if you have taken an inventory, which we might get to part of that today, I'm sure we will. You have made a good beginning. That's all it is a beginning, a good beginning. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning. I'm sorry, we're on the bottom of page 63, the last full paragraph, which many of us had never attempted, though our decision, step 3, to quit running our lives, was a vital and crucial step. It could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. Blocking us from what? Peace of mind, happiness, employability, relatability, maybe the power of God operating in and through us. We're blocked from just about everything when we're steeped with self. Our liquor was but a symptom. You'll hear that in the rooms a lot, as if we're acting like Ali income free. Let me tell you what, it may only be a symptom, but when I'm drinking, it's a real big symptom. In the last day of my drinking, Rob, it was the only symptom. I do not underestimate the power of alcohol, because the book tells me, remember that we deal with alcohol. Cunning, baffling, powerful, without help. It is way too much for a guy like me. So we had to get down to causes and conditions. The causes and conditions of my drinking, perhaps. The causes and conditions of my inability to get along with others, probably. The causes and conditions of what's blocking me from the power. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. I want to say this because we read this paragraph last week, Gigi, and after we were done, I realize that although I think step 3 ends at the bottom of page 62, I think this is either intern paragraph or more instructions, because at the end of this paragraph, it says being the end of these 2 paragraphs leading into step 4, being convinced that self manifested in various ways. That's a description of what we just talked about for the last 3 pages and the instructions for step 3. I really believe that step 4 begins with the word resentment, but I could be wrong, and I'm always open to scrutiny. Just not on the tape, Gigi. They're recording this. Don't embarrass me in front of my people. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding, fact-facing process. It's an effort to discover the truth about the stock and trade, what exists inside of me, what's saleable, what's not working, what's causing conflict and problems and producing confusion rather than harmony, what's making me be in collision, what's causing that chronic malcontent state where I find fault with the politics, the preachers. I can find fault with Jesus if you give me long enough. What's causing that going on inside of my head? One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business, if the alcoholic taking the inventory is to be successful, is to stay sober, we cannot fool ourselves about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. First, we took stock honestly, searching the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. What inside of me keeps causing me a default? What keeps driving my car into the ditch? Do I need a wheel alignment? Do I need an overhaul? Do I need a new car? I don't know. We're going to find out, though. I might just need to rotate the tires. Is that amazing? I take my car in for an overhaul and they say there's nothing wrong with it. Okay, well, there's plenty wrong with this one. Being convinced that self, this thing that's driving me, manifested in various ways. And we know the manifestations of self. We're going to consider 3 common, but there are a lot of uncommon. Self defeated us. We considered its common manifestations. I want to say this, and then we're going to get into the new session here with the word resentment, the bottom of page 64. We'll read a paragraph and then we'll comment on it collectively, Gigi and myself. I've heard people say in the room, my sponsor told me to write down some of my good qualities. It's been brought to my attention that I never drank over my good qualities. Me helping a little old lady across the street when she wanted to go never got me drunk. Me grabbing her purse and running off with it, well, that created a lot of trouble in my life. My good characteristic, you guys can read the 12 and 12 and do that in step 10, but not today. We're trying to search out the flaws in our makeup, not the good points. We're trying to figure out what's blocking, what's coagulated in that invisible spiritual umbilical cord that connects me to the divine. It's not the good qualities of my life, because I'm going to tell you all about those. Now, I'll say one more thing and then we'll move on. In the instructions for step 3, it says admitting he may be somewhat at fault. He is pretty sure that other people are more to blame. Those are the people who look for their part in the resentment inventory. My book has left that paragraph out. Here's what my book says. We ain't looking for no part, Bill Swan. We are resolutely looking at you. We're going to leave aside the other person and what you think they did. We're going to admit our mistakes honestly. This isn't about me making a little pie chart and I got a tiny sliver part because you got a big part, as our good friend Bob D says. Because if it wasn't for your big part, I'd have no part at all. And what happens is I don't realize anything, I don't discover no truth, and I don't change. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. And if I don't change, I get thirsty. It's the nature of the disease. And when I get thirsty enough, I quit drinking water and start drinking bourbon. Here we go. Resentment is the #1 offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. I remember looking up the word destroy 40 years ago when I read this. And at that time, the definition was render useless. You can't use me. God can't use me. No one can use me. I'm flawed because of what the poison that's feeding through my brain, the story that I'm telling myself over and over again that may or may not be true. From resentment stem all forms of spiritual disease. For we have not been mentally and physically ill only, we have been spiritually sick. Here's a condition, proposition, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Myself included, I'm not like well here, but how many of us with some appreciable time sober are running around the fellowship crooked? Personalities out of order. We still have page 52 all over our lives to be devilments. The four horsemen of alcoholism can gallop through my life sober, make no mistake about it. And some of us settle for not drinking and go into meetings, or maybe even worse than that, maybe just not drinking, because alcoholism demands treatment. I don't always have to be drinking to treat it, and I don't always have to pay for it myself. Someone else does sometimes. Sometimes I just take out my spiritual disturbance on some unsuspecting, innocent people. When the spiritual maladies overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. First instruction of step 4. We listed people, institutions, and principles with whom we were angry. Told it was like a shopping list at the grocery store. You don't write a story. You make a list: eggs, bacon, milk, bread, down the paper. And maybe we check them off as we go through the store and get them. We're not checking them off here. We asked ourselves why we were angry. Column 2 on the next page with the diagram. In most of the cases, the person we're mad at and the reason that we're mad found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks and ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, sometimes they say especially sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore. We were burned up. Gigi, we spent all that time read one paragraph. What do you want to say about resentments? And more specifically, what do you want to say about the self-esteem and the pride, how you look at it? And I know there's more than one self-esteem issue. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Hi, everybody. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Gigi. So resentment is referred to as the number one offender. We know that we're coming from a place here of complete and total, um, how can I put it? Delusion, obviously, about ourselves and about what we are, right? So we know that we have a body that cannot process alcohol. We know that we have a mind that cannot process reality. And we know that we have a will that cannot process powerlessness. So where does this leave me? This leaves me in a spot where I'm going to blame you for everything. Okay. This is what it is it comes from the Latin word centire, right? And they put the re in front of it, and it means again and again. So what is it that's happening with a resentment, right? Centire, again. So what am I doing here when I'm refeeling anger? Because centire means anger, right? What am I refeeling exactly? I'm refeeling hurt, anger, betrayal, grudges. And it's like a broken record that is constantly, constantly playing in my head over and over and over again. And notice, anytime you see mentally and physically ill, when the spirituality is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Mental and physical are always together. That's not to say we have a 3-part illness, because spirituality is not part of our illness. It's the remedy for our illness. Okay. So what are we having? What's going on here? I'm a broken record. I am enslaved like a puppet to a puppet master. It tells me that with Bill's step one experience on page 8, second paragraph, right? Um, and it tells me that I am locked in the bondage of myself. And it's essential to my recovery and my new life to get out of this. So, what's happening in here? I'm keeping secrets from myself without even knowing it. Why? Because when I have a resentment, it has the power to control me. So I'm part of the problem, but I'm also part of the solution. Okay. So what I need to do is step 4 is the great perspective adjustment. And it is meant to open up the sky of those dark thunder clouds and allow the light to come through. But what's going to happen when that light begins to come through? It's going to hurt my eyes because I've been hiding for it for so long. I don't even want to see it. And where are these resentments coming from? 99.9% of the time from expectations. I feel you owe me something. See, I feel that the causes and conditions are you, but they're really not you. The causes and conditions are my state of being. That's why it tells me we went back through our lives, all of our lives, like Bill pointed out, our sex life, our work life, our home life, our parent life, our child life. We went back through and we went back through them because this is done in reverse chronology. Do you really think that if you pushed someone in kindergarten, you're holding on to something so much that you're drinking over it? I don't think so. I think it's more than likely what happened a month ago that you're holding on to. That's why we go back through our lives. So, what do I have to do here? I have no control over people. And when I try to dictate how they act and feel, I am playing God. See step 3. Okay? So, what am I going to do here? I'm going to change from self centered beliefs, from thinking everything is about me. I am the center of my own universe. And I am now coming from a place of truth and empathy. Empathy for who? Empathy for you, not for me. Okay? Because I don't need my empathy. God knows I've had enough of it. So I'm going to move forward with faith. What is my self esteem? It is not the psychology's definition. Okay. When I'm looking at what was hurt, was it my pride? Was it my personal relationships? My self esteem? Self esteem is not a good definition like psychology's definition of self esteem. The self esteem are all the masks that I wear. Which stage character are you affecting right now in me? Are you affecting, if I'm resentful at my mother, is she offending the perfect daughter image that I'm trying to put out there? If I am angry with my child, is it because how dare you try to show all these people that are in my audience that I am not the perfect mother? If I'm angry at an alcoholic in the program, well, what's that? That's the spiritual person. That's the person, that is the perfect AAer. And if I'm on stage with you and you're my sponsee and you're saying things to me and I'm saying things to you and all the rest of you are in the audience, how dare you not make me look like the perfect alcoholic? And that's what I'm holding on to. That is my self esteem, my pride. How do I want to be viewed by my audience? How do I want my audience to see my relationship with you? Now, I've got a sponsee in this room. I hope I've got a couple, but I hope she doesn't mind if I call her out. If if I'm upset with Dina, which I'm not, but if I am upset with Dina for some reason, okay, is it because she is not she's in the audience. She's on stage with me and you're all in the audience. And she's saying to me, "Well, I know what you told me to do and I know what you said, but my experience is not the same as yours and I can't relate to that and I can't do that." And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, "Well, how dare you tell me I'm not doing this perfectly?" So that is what this step is all about. Bill is 100% right when he says it. Nowhere does it say my part. It says, where am I to blame? That's all I have.
Suzie, whole lot of information, guys, that we can grab pieces of. And let's understand what she's talking about, our lives. We went back through all these manifestations. So what they're calling these resentments, these irritants, these offenses is grudges. On our grudge list, we've got our shopping list, right? We went down the paper, my mom, my brother, my sister, my teacher, my ex-wife, my second ex-wife, my third. How many ex-wives you got, Bill Swan? I'm going to get it right. No, you're going to need to change because you keep marrying a woman, just a different name and face, different location. What are you drawing into your life? We said opposite each name are injuries. What was hurting us? Was it our self-esteem, security, ambitions, my way, personal or sex relations which had been interfered with? Now, notice we brought this out and we're going to bring it out again because it was very important. It took me a long time to see it. We were usually as definite as this example. I'm resentful at Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, my employer, and my wife. 4 names. Deidre, we do the questions at the last 10 minutes, my dear. Just to let you know. Because Mr. Brown is paying attention to my wife. He told my wife about my girlfriend. He may get my job at the office. What does this affect in me? My sex relations. All of a sudden, my wife become very frigid. She has a headache for years at a time. My self-esteem, which creates fear. That image, like Gigi said, I'm going to be exposed. Sex relations, self-esteem, fear, and security. So this one resentment's got this guy twisted. All of his instincts that seem to be in jeopardy. Then we got Mrs. Jones. She's crazy. She snubbed me. Can you believe she embarrassed me and she cut me off in front of my constituents? She committed her husband, who's my friend, for alcoholic insanity. What's wrong with her? Doesn't she understand we were just on a 2.5-year spree? Not a shopping spree, a wrecking spree. She's a gossip. So what I noticed there is anytime he assigns an adjective or a description of someone that's not kind, what he's doing is he's being judgmental and critical. As our good friend Bob Darrell says, the first thing some of us get after we get done, we get back after the bottle beat us to the point where we come into AA, please save our lives, is our opinion. And for some reason, when I get a good opinion or a judgment and I think I'm right, I usually give voice to it, which means now I'm tail bearing, starting trouble. And I don't realize as I'm getting sick in my self-righteousness, judging you. Usually, what I see in you is what I cannot see in me. Do you ever notice how when you're afraid, people around you seem to be threatening? When you've done something wrong, people seem to be wrong all the time. When you're angry, everyone seems to want to fight. None of it's happening except in my head. And then I bring that to the table. My employer, listen to this guy. He's unreasonably unjust. He wants me to come to work 5 days a week for 5 days pay. Are you kidding me? I'm the best employee he's got. He threatens to fire me for drinking. If it weren't for drinking, I wouldn't be the best employee he's got. Now I'm padding my expense account. Well, I'm doing a little bit of extra drinking that I'm writing off for my clients that I haven't seen in 3 months. But I intend to do well. And then he's upset with his wife because she misunderstands and nags. She likes Mr. Brown. She wants the house put in her name. What's going on? There's a conspiracy going on. Her and Mr. Brown are out to get me and get mine, and I don't like it. He doesn't realize that he has a girlfriend. That's what gives Mr. Brown the opportunity to tell his wife about her. He doesn't realize if he wasn't padding his expense account and drinking, he would have no problem with his boss. Mrs. Brown or Mrs. Jones is probably doing her husband a favor by stopping him from drinking himself to death. And why wouldn't she nag? He doesn't come home. He's a drunk. He's irresponsible. We talked about the effect we have on people many times throughout the book, The Doctor's Opinion, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter. 8 and chapter 9 and even part of chapter 7. Come on, the whole book's about how I show up in people's lives drunk or sober, either driven by alcohol or driven by fear. And I infect everyone around me. Gigi, alcoholism is not contagious, but it's very infectious. It says, now listen to this. Look at those 4 resentments. These are people that are in Bill's life, if Bill's the one writing the inventory today. They are not from childhood. He's not worried about whether he got breastfed on the right side of mom's body. He's not really worried or drinking himself to death over what happened in the 1st grade. But if I cannot get back the resentments that bind me up today, Gigi talked about putting all those resentments in front of the sunlight coming through the window. I'll never be able to go back to my last job, my last girlfriend, my last boss, my last probation officer. I will be steeped. I'll be locked into what's going on in my life today, which blinds me to everything else. The reason that they were able to take these steps in hours or a couple days was because they didn't write an Encyclopedia Britannica. You got someone with 700 resentments, they're not going to get far with this assignment. It's too much. It's overwhelming. What I got to look at is what's going on in my life today that's blocking me from this power. If I can get that down on paper with 4 current events, my wife, my boss, my sponsor, and my mother, if I can get those things and see where self manifests and puts me at odds with those people, where that thinking, telling myself a story that isn't true, and then building caseloads of information based on flawed information, if I can see that, guess what? I can see my way through this power. I make room for God to come in. And in step 10, which we will be on in a couple hours later. I mean, in this workshop here, it's going to take us another 2 years to get there. But trust me, through these instructions, if I follow them, I can have a 4-step done in an hour. I know what I'm afraid of. I know who I'm pissed off. And I know where my sexual conduct and my harms done others has put me at odds. Because she showed up and knocked on the door and told my wife I might be the father. We got problems. My misuse of my sex powers that were God-given have put me at odds and other people at odds with me. That's all we're looking for here is just a little bit. I know it says we went back through our lives. First, we're going to go horizontal. What lives are we talking about? My thought life, my sex life, my AA life, my family life, my social life today. What's eating me alive today? Once I get past that, guess what? We got the rest of our lives to go back in order from today backwards to see why my marriage failed the last time and the one before it. Why did I lose that good job? And why did they have a neighborhood watch against me? Why wasn't I invited to the block party? Why did that restraining order come? I'm not drinking over those, but they're the pattern of my life. We went back to our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. It's going to take some consideration. Now we're going to bring our thought life into this. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. Watch this. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. I always thought they were talking about the people who wronged me. Guess what? They're talking about people everywhere. Because when I show up some kind of way, what happens is I tend to take that guy with me everywhere I go. And like Bob Darrell says, if you move towns to get away from these people, it seems like their cousins show up at the other town waiting for you. It's because I'm the problem, but I'm concluding that they're the problem. If I can't see myself, I'm not going to get better. I'm going to be at odds with people all of my life. Sometimes it was remorse. That's sure I'm feeling bad about myself, knowing I'm creating the problems. Then we were sorry ourselves. But the more we fought, the more I tried to get you to see things my way to get what I want. In all areas, the ambition covers it all, be it sex, security, society. The more we tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Sometimes I get it, I get to embarrass them first in front of a bunch of people. Guess what it says? Our moments of triumph were short-lived. It's an explanation of that diagram. Now, before I get into why resentments are so fatal, we'll hear from Judy. I can give my narrative while I'm reading.
Hey guys, Alcoholic Gigi. So what are we listing here? We're listing people, we're listing institutions, and we're listing principles. Now, normally I don't have to explain to people what a person is and what an institution is, but principle is what they have trouble with. Principle, all it is a truth to us, right? When I was younger, and my mom used to, she was great for, saying the phrase, it's the principle of the thing. And my father would say to her, how's that working out for you? And that's what we have to remember. We're about, when we're going to make this list, we're about to examine the wreckage that has resulted out of my attempts to run the show and what is really blocking me from God, right? So notice they call it a grudge list. And when it talks about, was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our relations, which have been interfered with? What I am looking at that, when I am looking at that question, what I'm seeing is, when can I get even with you? That's what I'm looking, right? When can I extract my revenge on you? And this is part of the reason that therapists, we often fail at therapy, because I have had a couple of therapists, and I'm not knocking it, but I never had a therapist ask me where I was to blame. I've only had therapists treat me like a victim that I believed I was. And here's a newsflash for you. Victims don't get sober. So my belief inventory is what I'm looking at here. I'm looking at my truth inventory, my belief inventory about myself. So my first column, I'm a victim. My second column, I am still a victim. And my third column, I am an even bigger victim than I thought. And this is what's going to keep me enslaved in self. So I'm going to look at this. And what I tell people is this is a real easy way to do it, I think, because leaving at step 4 is like being in the hospital in the middle of open heart surgery and standing up and saying to the doctor, I don't think I need this surgery, and trying to walk out of the hospital in a surgical gown, bleeding with the chest wide open. And that's what you're doing to yourself if you leave in the middle of step 4, right? So I'm going to look at this, and this is a summary, right? So what I tell people to do is, the first night you're working on this, or day that you're working on this, just give me the names. Just give you the names. That's all you have to do, right? Mom, 4 spaces. Dad, 4 spaces. Brother, 4 spaces. Sister, 4 spaces, right? The next day, give me short, snappy sentences, under 20 words. This is not a novel. If I'm going to write the story of my life, well, maybe I'll talk to Jeff Bezos and he'll put it on Amazon for sale for $12.99 and I'll make $1 million. But that's not what this is. This is not, well, Mom, from the day I was born, she always favored my older brother or sister in front of me. And when we would go out, no one wants to hear it. Okay, I want to know why you're angry at Mom. Tell me why you're angry at Mom. She didn't treat me right. She didn't let me go out with my friends. She was not at my wedding. I'm just picking random things here. So, and then what it affects. There is a huge difference between security and ambition. Security is what I want. I'm sorry, security is what I feel I need. Ambition is what I want. Okay. My self esteem, we've already explained that. And so what do we have here? We have this first column, and if I look at this resentment inventory that's printed out here, right? I always I was one of those people that walked around with a t-shirt on that said Mr. Brown needs his butt kicked because I look at this thing and I see who's to blame. Well, Mrs. Brown, Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, and my employer. They're to blame for this. And I'm like outraged. I'm like, this guy got involved in somebody else's marriage. How dare he? I'm not even looking at the fact that this guy's got a mistress, right? That doesn't even occur to me to look at this. It just occurs to me as an alcoholic and as somebody that if I were doing this inventory, so what else am I seeing here? I'm seeing I have resentment when I didn't get my way in the past. I'm seeing anger and depression when I'm not getting my way in the future right now at this moment. And I'm seeing extreme fear that I will not get my way in the future. This is my honesty about self. And what step 4 shows me is what is blocking me from carrying out my third step decision. What is blocking me? Why can't I see the way to God? Why can't I see the way out of self? Why can't I see the way out of bondage? And now I'm a lawyer in a courtroom making a case against you. Anybody ever had this experience? You write out your fourth step and you're really, really excited about it because you know when you go to your sponsor or your spiritual advisor or your priest or who you ever go to with this thing, you just know they're going to say, oh my God, these are the most horrible people I have ever seen in my life, you poor thing. And when you get to that person, that's not what they say. And then you're like, fine, I'll just find another sponsor. I'll just find another priest. I'll just find another spiritual advisor. That's your first instinct. And don't you even get madder? Doesn't the sponsor go on the resentment list when they don't agree with you? Up, you're on it now. Because my principles are my truth. And this is how I see my truth. I see it if I don't look at what I did, I won't see why they retaliated. And as long as I maintain the victim stance, I will never achieve that emotional sobriety and I will stay spiritually sick forever. The actor is me thinking that I am who I want to believe. And this is a belief about my attitudes and my behaviors. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. Nothing. So it could be that you wrote out 500 words and maybe 10 of those words counted if they weren't thorough and honest. And what do I see here? What it becomes is when I get to the top of page 66, it is clearly visible to me now, clearly, that my natural instincts have gone completely out of control. But all I'm seeing is, well, those damn people, I see, I was right. I was right. Those people are horrible. And that's about as far as I get. And then I feel badly about what I did, and that's remorse, that's regret. And that's even more ego because two things will result as a result of me feeling too good about myself or too bad about myself. Either way, I will not think that I am worthy of the grace of God, and I will not receive that free gift that's being offered to me. So, why does it tell me that the victor only seemed to win? Are there any winners in war? And that's the thing of it. So, I've got a war raging within myself. And when I realize that I have a damn good reason to hate you, how do I really feel? How do I feel? Can you compare that feeling to the feeling of when you actually say, okay, I'm going to let go of this? Boy, you talk about that feeling when you say, I'm about to let go of this and I'm about to see where I have been wrong. That is a better feeling than I ever got from taking a drink because I feel like a giant weight is now lifted off my shoulder. And because I forgive you does not mean that if you're still uh, a person I do not want in my life, it doesn't mean I have to have you in my life. It just means that I've forgiven you. I've let go so I can be forgiven because forgiveness comes from God. But I'm allowing God to work through me in that forgiveness process. Thank you.
Gigi. Right. And for those of you who have not encroached on this step, remember, we're on a fact-finding, fact-facing. Gigi been doing this for years, taking people through the steps, and she knows what the next few pages are going to bring. And sometimes it's hard to stay in the paragraph we're at. So when she was talking about the court and looking at things from a different angle and forgiveness and all that and resolute, those come in a little bit, and we're going to get there. She has a lot of experience. So sometimes we try to funnel it all to you all at once. I believe that the reason they say, and it's one of the only places where it says we were as definite. If I'm going to be as definite as that example, I remember I told you guys, my friend Larry had one of his sponsors handed him a piece of paper. It says, I'm resentful at Brown. The cause was identical. What it affected, it was this, he copied it verbatim. And his sponsor said, what are you doing? He said, I'm as definite as that example. He said, you copied it out of the book. He said, you're damn right I did. I don't want to drink. So he took it literal. But what I'm saying is if you got a sponsor that's having you write 700 names, trust me, my experience tells me you will never get done. I'm not going that deep into it. It'd be overwhelming. But if I can get rid of the blockage that's taking place today, that's exactly what the definite example shows. 4 current events. If we get way past that, we're going to get bogged down by this. It'll take us 3 years to take these steps. Sometimes we take these steps with a sense of urgency as if our life depends on it. I wasn't up as odds with people as Gigi was describing in her head, talking about the way I feel good about myself or bad. My behavior was ending me up in jail. Something had to change in my life. And this was the remedy for it. So it is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, that means I permit that, I give them permission. I invite these things in. Do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? So say something happened yesterday, last month, or last year. If it's still living in my head today, I'm missing the opportunity of what's going on in my life today. At the very least, Gigi, I don't get an opportunity to collect new resentments because I can't get past the old ones. What a shame that is to not go out and correct the world today. But the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. They're using words like deep and infinitely grave. That means deep again. They're deep seated. Their roots go down into me. They got my heart in a stranglehold. What's going on in my head has got my heart encapsulated in nothing but garbage. And it can't breathe. It can't beat. Whether Terry calls it a love muscle. The love muscle can't move because it's constricted by all these binds of self that got it strangulated. Now watch this, for when we harbor, to harbor means to give a safe place to rest. For when we harbor such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit, from the grace of God, from the presence of God. Call it what you will. The insanity of alcohol returns. Remember, our problem centers in the mind. And when the obsession is engaged or activated by my restless, irritable, and discontented nature, and that's how I feel when I get resentful, I get a knot in my gut. I get thirsty. And when I get thirsty, when the obsession's upon me, I'm drinking. That's my experience. Some can think the drink through. That's not me. Some can call their sponsor. Some can make good decisions. Some butts can fall off and they can bring it into a meeting. When the obsession, and I know what that is for me, takes over, my teeth start shattering on the way to the dope hole and nothing's going to stand in my way. And it's always a bad day because if I feel that revved up already, I know when I put the first one in me, the end of the world's coming, but I can't stop it. I'm obsessed. An irrational thought that overrides every other thought to the contrary or self-preservatory nature. And I can't get rid of it on my own. I have to have God's help. And when I'm full of resentment, I don't have access to the kingdom to my way of thinking. I always do. I just don't know it. I don't consider it. For us, insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again. For us, to drink is to die. If we were to live, if you want to go on in your life, guess what? We had to be free of anger, the grouch, running around moping like the chronic malcontent. Talks about our protestations, whatever I'm protesting about. The grouch and the brainstorm, which is a sudden upheaval like a ship on the sea, thrown into the air by a big tidal wave, were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for the alcoholics, these things are poison. So they spent a paragraph now describing how infectious his resentments are. Now it tells us the next instruction. We turn back to the list, for the list held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. So as Gigi said, when you go into a court of law, and it's not original, I didn't make it up, I would love to because it's brilliant. When you go into a criminal court of law, you have the defense table and the prosecution table. What we've been doing all of our lives is we've been prosecuting these people. Anyone that'll listen to it, I'm building a case. Now I got the floor, and I'm telling you why to convict this son of a gun, because look what he did to me. It was explained if I was going to look at this from an entirely different angle, I'm going to get up from the prosecution bench. I'm going to walk over to the defense table, and I'm going to start telling the jury why we need to give this guy a break and not hang him out to dry. Why maybe what he's doing to me has been done to him all his life and he can't help himself, because the book says the first thing apparent was that this world was wrong. We began to realize that they were sick just like ourselves. That's going to be in the next paragraph. So if I'm looking at the list from an entirely different angle, I've got to start telling myself a different story, because the story I'm telling myself has me in bondage, the bondage of self. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. Slaves and prisoners are dominated. I've been both. Human trafficking voluntarily, because I'll do anything for one more. But when I'm in jail and you tell me what time to get up, when I can shave, shower, go to the bathroom, and be on my rack, you're dominating me, whether I believe it or not. In that state, in that frame of mind, the wrongdoings of other people, fancy, that means I make them up or continue to tell myself a story that isn't true so I can continue to resent them. Or real, maybe what I'm suffering from really happened. Maybe, probably not, but maybe. Not the way I thought completely. Fancied or real, had power to actually kill. How could we escape? These resentments must be mastered, but how? Oh, we saw that they must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. So, if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life was sufficient, many of us would have recovered long ago, because I'd easily dismissed the resentment by saying, you know what, Gigi, I wish I wasn't mad at you. Okay, let's move forward. No, what happens is she say, what were you mad at me about in the first place? And all of a sudden self wakes up again, because she won't even accept the fact that I'm saying, listen, what you did was wrong, but I'm willing to look past it. She doesn't want to take responsibility for what I think is wrong. She's saying, what are you talking about? Now I'm twice as mad. I can't wish them away any more than alcohol. They're going to give us a course, which we're probably not going to get to today. Gigi, what we do is we let them come in and talk, them, meaning the people here in the Zoom land. We let everyone now come in and say, do you want to, we got 4 minutes left of this portion. Do you want to say anything about the 2 paragraphs that we just read?
Sure, I'll go real quick. So this paragraph, I love this paragraph because in this particular paragraph, we die 7 times, right? We have it's fatal, we have it's grave, we have with us to drink is to die. Actually, this paragraph and the next paragraph, if we were to live. What else do we have? Poison, so the page on this page, we are going, so it's interesting because I have a 3rd edition, right? And in my 3rd edition, and the key to the future, right? Did we do that paragraph? We didn't do that paragraph yet, right?
And it was actually 3 paragraphs. My book is so
It's 3.
mucked up that I thought there were only 2. You're right. We did
Okay,
3
that's what I thought.
paragraphs.
Yeah. So if I don't find the key to the future, that means I don't have one. But it's interesting because I also have a 3rd edition here. And in the 3rd edition, it says, in the 4th edition, it says exactly what yours says. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. In the 3rd edition that I have, it says we were prepared to look for it. Interesting. Because are we talking about looking for the key to the future from an entirely different angle? And that different angle is, did they really hurt us? Or did we have a lot to do with it? Right? And what it's telling me is the maintenance of my spiritual condition. It's important, right? Because what I now have, whatever my spiritual condition might be, it might not be sufficient next year, 3 years from now, whatever. And it's asking me these questions. Do I see this? Do I really see this for what it is? Do I really see that if my hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual condition, that I'm sabotaging myself, that I'm killing myself? Do I really see that? Okay. We have to look at it from a totally different angle. And it's hard because our ego is fighting against us and it does not want us to look at it from an entirely different angle. Right. And if I am really convinced, I have to do that. I have to look at it. The power to kill, they must be mastered. Look at the powerful, powerful language in that. And what is a brainstorm? That is a transient, violent rage. And what is a slow burn? Excuse me. And the grouch. The grouch is a slow burn. So I've got the grouch, slow burn, and I've got that transient, violent rage inside of me. And of course, these things are poison. Why are they poisoning me? Because they're killing me. They are killing me. And then after all of that, okay, that is where that magical paragraph happens, where it says, we turned back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it or look for it from an entirely different angle. I realized I saw it with real eyes, finally. This is the beginning of the forgiveness process. The thing is I have to be convinced enough that these resentments are killing me before I'm ready to go ahead, because the transformation begins on this page and continues on the next one. And I'm not going to do a spoiler alert here. But this is where I have to see this, and it might take a while for you to see it. But if you've ever been with a sponsee and you've gone on with this 5th step, excuse me, I can, for hours and hours and hours, and then the next day, when you've gone through all of this, and then they start with, this person, I cannot stand this person anymore. That's a sign that there's going to be some trouble ahead. So thank you.
All right, guys, that's going to conclude our recorded session for today.